Hello and welcome, fellow adventurers, to a journey that will take us deep into the past, to a place that has completely turned our understanding of human history on its head. I'm talking about Göbekli Tepe. Imagine a time long before the pyramids of Egypt, even before the invention of pottery or writing. In what is now southeastern Turkey, a society of hunter-gatherers achieved something monumental. They built this sprawling, incredible complex of massive stone pillars. These aren't just any stones. They are towering T-shaped monoliths, some weighing up to 20 tons, arranged in circles. What's truly astonishing is that this site is around 12,000 years old, making it the world's first known temple. But what truly captivates the imagination are the intricate carvings that adorn these pillars. An entire zoo of animals is etched into the stone. Powerful bulls, slinking foxes, dangerous wild boars, graceful cranes, and venomous snakes. These aren't just random decorations. Each animal, each symbol, tells a story. They whisper secrets about the beliefs, the fears, and the cosmology of a people we are only just beginning to understand. Why did these hunter-gatherers, who had not yet settled down to farm, invest such immense effort into building this sacred place? What did these animal symbols mean to them? Were they representations of gods, protective spirits, or perhaps records of a cosmic event? The truth is, Göbekli Tepe presents us with more questions than answers, challenging everything we thought we knew about prehistoric societies. In this series, Göbekli Tepe, Decoding the Animal Symbolism, we're going to dive headfirst into this mystery. We'll explore the significance of each creature, from the fierce predators to the soaring birds, and try to piece together the puzzle of our ancestors' spiritual world. We'll examine the latest archaeological findings and theories to understand what drove these people to create such a breathtaking monument at the dawn of civilization. This is more than just an exploration of ancient art. It's a quest to understand the very origins of religion and organized society. So if you're as fascinated by ancient mysteries as I am, make sure you hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you don't miss a single episode. Join me as we journey back in time and attempt to decode the secrets carved in stone at Göbekli Tepe. It's going to be an incredible adventure. Have you ever stood on a hill and wondered what secrets lie buried beneath your feet? For centuries, a gentle rise in the Anatolian plains of modern-day Turkey was known to locals simply as Göbekli Tepe, the Potbelly Hill. It was a familiar landmark, a place where farmers tilled their fields, occasionally turning up unusual pieces of carved stone. But no one could have imagined the earth-shattering secret this unassuming hill was guarding. Our story begins not with a grand expedition, but with the quiet curiosity of archaeologists who decided to take a closer look at those strange stones. Picture this: the sun beating down on the arid landscape, the air thick with dust and anticipation. In the 1990s, a team led by German archaeologist Klaus Schmidt began to dig. They weren't searching for a lost city or a king's tomb. They were simply following a hunch. What they found would not just rewrite a chapter of history. It would tear the entire book apart. As the layers of soil were carefully brushed away, something extraordinary emerged from the dirt. Not mud brick huts or simple pottery, but gigantic T-shaped pillars of stone, some standing over 18 feet tall and weighing up to 10 tons. These weren't crude, primitive markers. They were intricately carved with stunning reliefs of animals: snarling foxes, powerful bulls, scorpions, and graceful birds. The level of artistry and engineering was breathtaking. Imagine the whispers spreading through the archaeological community, the hushed phone calls, the urgent emails. What was this place? The initial scrapes of trowels against stone quickly turned into a symphony of discovery, accompanied by gasps of sheer disbelief. The pillars weren't scattered randomly. They were arranged in deliberate, massive circles. Think Stonehenge, but thousands of years older. As the team dug deeper, more circles were revealed, each a monumental undertaking. The scale was almost incomprehensible. How could a society, believed to be simple hunter-gatherers, have organized the labor, quarried the stone, and possessed the artistic vision to create something on this epic scale? It just didn't make sense. This discovery sent shockwaves through our understanding of the past. The established timeline of human civilization went something like this. First, we learned to farm, then we settled in villages, which grew into cities, and only then, with a stable food supply and a settled population, did we build complex temples and monuments. Göbekli Tepe flipped that script completely on its head. The initial dating of the site came back, and the numbers were staggering. Around 9,600 BC. That's almost 12,000 years ago. This wasn't just older than Stonehenge and the pyramids of Giza. It was built before the invention of pottery, before writing, even before the wheel. It was built by people we had long considered to be nomadic hunter-gatherers, living in small, scattered bands. The implications were profound. It suggested that a complex belief system, a shared religion, or ideology powerful enough to mobilize hundreds of people might have been the catalyst for civilization itself. Did the need to build and maintain this sacred site bring people together, forcing them to develop new social structures, and eventually agriculture to feed the workforce? Did our ancestors build a temple first, and then build a city around it? Göbekli Tepe wasn't just a collection of old stones. It was a fundamental challenge to the story we tell ourselves about our own origins. It was the world's first known temple, built by hunter-gatherers on the very cusp of a new world. What's even more mysterious is what happened next. After about 1,000 years of use, the site wasn't destroyed or abandoned to the elements. It was deliberately and carefully buried. Pillar by pillar, circle by circle, the entire complex was entombed under tons of earth, creating the very potbelly hill that would protect its secret for millennia. Why? Why would a culture spend generations building such a magnificent ceremonial center, only to painstakingly bury it? Was it a ritual act? Was it to protect it from a new emerging way of life? Or was it to hide something? The act of burial is as baffling as the act of its creation. It's a mystery wrapped in an enigma, hidden beneath a hill. As we stand at the precipice of this ancient puzzle, we are left with more questions than answers. Who were the people who carved these stones with such skill? What did the animal symbols mean? Were they representations of gods, spirits of the animal world, or constellations in the night sky? What rituals took place within these stone circles? The silence of 12,000 years is deafening, but the stones themselves speak a powerful, albeit cryptic, language. They tell a story of a pivotal moment in human history, a time when our ancestors made a monumental leap of imagination and cooperation. Göbekli Tepe forces us to reconsider the very definition of primitive. The people who built this were not the brutish cavemen of popular imagination. They possessed a sophisticated understanding of engineering, a rich symbolic world, and a powerful social organization that we are only just beginning to comprehend. They were pioneers who looked at a barren hilltop and saw a canvas for their cosmos, a meeting place for the sacred and the profane. This wasn't just construction. It was a statement, a declaration carved in stone that humanity had arrived, ready to shape the world according to its beliefs. The initial discovery was just the beginning. To this day, less than 5% of Göbekli Tepe has been excavated. What other circles, what other carvings, what other secrets remain buried beneath the Anatolian soil? Each new find has the potential to further revolutionize our understanding of our shared past. This isn't just an archaeological site. It's a time capsule, a message from our distant ancestors waiting to be fully deciphered. The story of Göbekli Tepe is far from over. In fact, it's just getting started. What if I told you that everything you learned about the dawn of civilization might be wrong? For decades, we've been taught a simple, linear story. First came farming, then came villages, and only then, After we had full bellies and a roof over our heads, did we have the luxury of building grand temples and developing complex beliefs? It's a neat and tidy progression that makes a lot of sense. But what if the story is actually the other way around? What if the human drive to come together, to believe in something bigger than ourselves, was the spark that ignited civilization? This isn't a wild theory. It's the astonishing story told by a place called Göbekli Tepe. Before its discovery, our understanding of the Stone Age was pretty clear-cut. We imagined small nomadic bands of hunter-gatherers, constantly on the move, following herds of animals and the changing seasons. Their primary focus, we assumed, was survival. The idea that these groups could organize themselves to build something monumental, something on the scale of Stonehenge or the pyramids, was unthinkable. It simply didn't fit the model. The conventional wisdom was firm. Massive construction projects require a surplus of food, which means agriculture. It requires a settled population living in towns and villages. It requires a hierarchical society with leaders to direct the labor. Hunter-gatherers, by definition, lacked all of these. They were seen as being too preoccupied with the daily grind of finding their next meal to even dream of such a feat. Then, in the 1990s, a German archaeologist named Klaus Schmidt began excavating a rounded hilltop in southeastern Turkey. What he and his team uncovered didn't just add a new chapter to human history. It forced us to tear out the old pages and start again. They found not a settlement, not a village, but a sprawling complex of massive carved stone pillars arranged in circles. The pillars, some weighing up to 20 tons and standing 18 feet high, were T-shaped and adorned with intricate carvings of animals: foxes, lions, snakes, scorpions, and vultures. This was Göbekli Tepe, and it was breathtaking. But the most shocking part was its age. Using radiocarbon dating, Schmidt determined that the oldest layers of Göbekli Tepe were constructed around 9,500 BCE. That's an almost unimaginable 11,500 years ago. Let that sink in for a moment. This is a date that precedes the invention of pottery by 1,000 years. It's 6,000 years older than Stonehenge, and 7,000 years older than the Great Pyramid of Giza. Critically, it's thousands of years before the generally accepted timeline for the beginning of agriculture, the so-called Neolithic Revolution. There were no domesticated animals nearby, no cultivated fields of wheat or barley. The tools found on site were simple flint points and scrapers, typical of a hunter-gatherer society. All the evidence pointed to an inescapable and revolutionary conclusion. The world's first known temple, this incredible feat of engineering and artistry, was built by people who were still living a nomadic, hunting and gathering lifestyle. This discovery completely shattered the agriculture-first model of civilization. It was like finding a smartphone in a medieval castle. How was this possible? How could bands of hunter-gatherers, supposedly living hand-to-mouth, manage to quarry, transport, and erect these colossal stone monoliths? It implies a level of social organization that was previously thought to be impossible for such societies. To build something like Göbekli Tepe would have required hundreds of laborers, working together for months or even years on a shared project. Think about the logistics involved. Someone had to have the vision for the structure. Someone had to be the architect, designing the layout and the carvings. Someone had to be the engineer, figuring out how to cut 20-ton blocks of limestone from the quarry with nothing but flint tools and brute force. And then there's the question of feeding this workforce. If they weren't farming, they must have been provisioned by an army of hunters and gatherers, combing the surrounding landscape for gazelle, wild grains, nuts, and berries on an industrial scale. This coordination suggests a social structure far more complex than a simple egalitarian band. It points towards the existence of leaders, planners, and perhaps even a religious elite or shamans who could command the authority and respect needed to mobilize such a massive, sustained effort. These were not just a few scattered families. This was a society capable of long-term planning and large-scale cooperation, all unified by a common purpose. What was that purpose? The site itself gives us clues. Göbekli Tepe is not a home. There are no hearths for cooking, no domestic refuse, no signs of permanent habitation. The structures are clearly ceremonial. The pillars are not just structural supports. They are stylized human figures, with arms carved along their sides and belts depicted around their waists. They stand in circles, facing inward, as if participating in a ritual or gathering. The animal carvings aren't random doodles. They likely represent powerful spirits, totem animals, or figures from a rich and complex mythology we can now only guess at. Klaus Schmidt famously called it the first cathedral on a hill. It appears that these hunter-gatherers gathered here not to live, but to worship, to conduct rituals, and to connect with their cosmos. This leads us to the most profound implication of Göbekli Tepe. It suggests that the desire for community and shared belief, the spiritual and social glue of religion, might have been the actual catalyst for civilization. The old theory was that agriculture created settled communities, which then led to complex societies and religion. Göbekli Tepe flips that script. Perhaps the need to build and maintain this sacred center is what brought people together in the first place. Maybe the logistical challenge of feeding the builders and pilgrims at this cathedral is what spurred the experiments that would eventually lead to the domestication of plants and animals. In other words, the temple came before the town. The desire to worship together may have been the very thing that pushed humanity to invent farming and settle down. This idea is a seismic shift in our understanding of human development. It suggests that our journey towards civilization wasn't just driven by practical needs like food and shelter, but by a much deeper, more abstract human impulse, the need for meaning, for ritual, and for community. The people who built Göbekli Tepe weren't just surviving. They were creating a shared world of symbols and beliefs. They were capable of abstract thought, complex social organization, and incredible feats of engineering, all while still living off the land. They weren't the simple, primitive hunter-gatherers of our old textbooks. They were pioneers on the verge of a new world, a world they themselves were helping to create, not out of necessity, but out of a shared vision. Göbekli Tepe stands as a silent stone testament to the idea that the human spirit, our need to gather and believe, might be the oldest and most powerful force for change in our history. Now, let's talk about what makes Göbekli Tepe truly breathtaking: the pillars. Standing tall in concentric circles, these monumental T-shaped stones are more than just ancient architecture. They are a canvas, a gallery from the dawn of time, covered in some of the most enigmatic and beautiful art ever created. Imagine running your hand over the cool, limestone surface and feeling the raised outline of a creature carved 12,000 years ago. These aren't just random doodles. We're talking about a whole zoo of animals, each one depicted with incredible skill and a profound sense of purpose. We see sly foxes, coiled snakes, powerful wild boars, graceful gazelles, and majestic birds of prey like vultures and cranes. Even smaller creatures like insects and spiders make an appearance. What's fascinating is the sheer number and variety of these carvings. On some pillars, animals are crowded together, almost jostling for space, creating a dynamic, vibrant scene. On others, a single creature might dominate, demanding your full attention. This isn't just decoration. The placement, the choice of animal, the way they interacted, it all feels deliberate, like a complex language we're just beginning to understand. These carvings are a masterclass in prehistoric art. They are both realistic and stylized. You can instantly recognize a fox by its bushy tail and pointed snout, or a wild boar by its muscular build and tusks. But there's more to it. These aren't simple portraits of the local wildlife. The animals are often depicted in aggressive or dynamic poses. A leaping fox, a menacing boar with its bristles raised. This suggests they represent something more than just dinner. They are symbols, carriers of meaning, embodying power, danger, cunning, or perhaps even acting as spiritual guardians. Look closely at Pillar 43, famously known as the Vulture Stone. It's one of the most complex and debated scenes in all of archaeology. Here we see a collection of figures: a massive vulture with one wing outstretched, a scorpion, a headless human figure, and other birds. Is this a story? A myth? A record of a celestial event, like a comet strike, as some researchers have proposed? Or could it be a depiction of a funeral rite, a practice known as excarnation, where the bodies of the dead were left for vultures to consume, releasing the spirit? The vulture, in this context, wouldn't be a simple scavenger, but a sacred psychopomp, a guide for souls to the afterlife. This blend of realism and symbolism is what makes Göbekli Tepe so captivating. The artists weren't just showing us the world around them. They were telling us how they saw the world, what they believed, and what they feared. Snakes, for example, are one of the most common motifs. They slither down the sides of pillars, often in large, writhing groups. In many cultures, snakes represent rebirth and transformation because they shed their skin. Could that be what they meant to the people here? Or did they represent a more primal, threatening force of nature? And what about the animals that are conspicuously absent? While the carvings are full of wild and often dangerous creatures, we see very few depictions of common prey animals like deer. And even more strangely, there are almost no female animals shown. The art is overwhelmingly masculine, dominated by powerful, aggressive male figures. This selective representation tells us that the carvers were making very specific choices, embedding a particular worldview into the stone. They weren't just cataloging nature. They were creating a narrative. Consider the predators. Foxes, leopards, and boars are everywhere. These animals are fast, intelligent, and dangerous. They were the competitors of the hunter-gatherers, but perhaps they were also admired for their strength and survival skills. Could these carvings represent a kind of respect, or even a shamanic belief that by carving the animal, the hunter could tap into its power? Maybe these were clan totems, with different groups identifying with different powerful creatures. The pillars themselves are anthropomorphic, meaning they are shaped to represent human-like figures. They have a T-shaped head on the sides, long, slender arms with hands that meet at the front, just above a carved belt and loincloth. But these human-like pillars are surrounded, covered, and seemingly guarded by this menagerie of wild beasts. It's as if these powerful animal spirits are integral to the identity of these stylized human figures. It's a world where the boundary between human and animal is blurred, where spirits and forces of nature are given tangible, awe-inspiring form. Each pillar is a chapter, and the entire site is a library of stone, filled with stories waiting to be deciphered. We're not just looking at art. We're looking at the belief system of a people who lived so long ago that they defy our very definitions of civilization. They were hunter-gatherers, but they were also thinkers, artists, and engineers of the sacred. The carvings they left behind are our most direct link to their minds, a powerful and humbling invitation to ponder the very origins of religion, society, and the stories we tell ourselves. As we continue our exploration, we'll all dive deeper into the specific meanings of these animals and what they can tell us about the people who carved them. This stone zoo is far more than a collection of images. It's a philosophical and spiritual declaration, etched at the very dawn of the modern human journey. Imagine this. You're walking through the arid landscape of southeastern Turkey 12,000 years ago. You come across a hill, and on it, something truly extraordinary. Not a village, not a settlement, but a series of immense circular structures, partially dug into the earth. As you descend into one, the world outside fades away. You are now in a sacred, defined space. The first thing you'd notice are the pillars. Massive, T-shaped monoliths, some towering over 18 feet tall and weighing up to 20 tons. These aren't just random stones. They are carefully quarried and arranged to form a circle, a ring of silent stone giants. They define the boundary between the ordinary and the extraordinary. These pillars are the canvas for the animal art we've been discussing. But what's fascinating is how they are arranged. Let's look closer at a typical enclosure. You have an outer ring of smaller pillars, connected by low stone walls or benches. Think of it like a seating area, a place for participants or observers to gather. It suggests that whatever happened here was a communal event, something meant to be witnessed. But the real focus, the heart of the enclosure, is the center. Here, two much larger, more imposing T-pillars stand parallel to each other, facing the entrance. These central pillars are often the most elaborately carved, not just with animals, but with abstract symbols and even human-like features, like arms and hands, suggesting they represent stylized humanoids or divine beings. It's as if these two central figures are presiding over the entire gathering, the main actors on this prehistoric stage. So the animal carvings aren't just a random gallery. Their position matters. Are certain animals always on the central pillars? Are others relegated to the outer ring? The location of a carving within the enclosure, whether it's central and prominent or peripheral, could tell us about its importance in the belief system of these ancient people. For instance, powerful predators like leopards are often found in key positions, suggesting they held a significant, perhaps protective or revered, role in the rituals performed here. The very construction process is a testament to incredible human effort and coordination. Think about it. These were hunter-gatherer communities. They had no domesticated animals to help haul these massive stones, no metal tools to carve them. Every pillar was hewn from the nearby limestone quarry using flint tools. It would have taken hundreds of people working together with a shared purpose to move a single pillar and hoist it into place. This wasn't a casual construction project. It was a monumental undertaking, an act of devotion that spanned generations. Why go to such lengths? The effort involved tells us that these structures were of paramount importance. The act of building itself was likely a ritual. The quarrying, the carving, the transporting, the erecting each step was probably imbued with symbolic meaning. It was a physical manifestation of their cosmic order, a way of building their beliefs right into the landscape. And then comes the most baffling part of the story. After centuries of use, these magnificent structures were not simply abandoned to the elements. They were deliberately and carefully buried. Workers filled the enclosures with tons of debris, including stone fragments, animal bones, and flint tools. It's an almost unimaginable act. Why would a society invest so much energy into creating something so grand, only to intentionally bury it? This act of burial is perhaps the biggest clue to their purpose. It suggests a cyclical process. Perhaps an enclosure was used for a specific period, and then, its ritual life complete, it needed to be respectfully interred, sealed away like a time capsule. Maybe burying it was the final act of the ritual itself, a way of decommissioning the sacred space to make way for a new one. This pattern of construction, use, and burial is repeated across the site, with older enclosures being covered over and newer ones built nearby or even on top. So, when we look at the fox, the snake, or the boar carved on a pillar, we can't just see it as a picture. We have to see it within this dynamic architectural and ritual context. We're not just looking at art. We're looking at a piece of a much larger performance. The enclosure is the stage, the pillars are the actors, and the animals are part of the story being told. Understanding this space, the circular layout, the central figures, the surrounding benches, the monumental effort of construction, and the final, mysterious burial is the key. It transforms the animal carvings from simple depictions into active participants in a complex, 12,000-year-old ritual drama. The message of the animals is interwoven with the very stones that form their home. In our next video, we will start to decode some of these specific animal symbols, beginning with the most frequently depicted creatures at Göbekli Tepe. What could they have meant to the people who carved them with such care? Have you ever wondered what the first stories we told ourselves were? Before writing, before cities, what did our ancestors hold sacred? If we journey back nearly 12,000 years to Göbekli Tepe, a mysterious site that rewrites human history, we find clues carved in stone. And one animal appears more than any other, the fox. Walking among these ancient, monolithic pillars, you'd find yourself surrounded by their images. Foxes are everywhere, etched with incredible skill and detail. Some are captured mid-pounce, others stand guard with watchful eyes and an alert, almost intelligent stance. These aren't just simple pictures of animals. The sheer number of fox carvings, their prominent placement, tells us they held a deep, profound meaning for the people who built this incredible place. So, what was it? What did the fox represent to our Stone Age ancestors? Let's think about the fox itself. Even today, we associate it with cunning, with cleverness and adaptability. It's a creature of the twilight, moving between the world of day and the world of night. For a hunter-gatherer society, whose very survival depended on understanding the natural world, these qualities would have been highly respected, even revered. The fox was a master survivor, a silent hunter, an expert navigator of the landscape. Could these carvings be a tribute to those very skills? A way of honoring the intelligence and stealth they needed to thrive? Perhaps by carving the fox, they were trying to invoke its spirit, to borrow its cunning for their own hunts. But the story might go even deeper. In many cultures throughout history, animals that bridge two worlds, like the nocturnal fox, active at dawn, and dusk, are seen as spirit guides. They are messengers, creatures that can travel between the physical world and the spiritual realm. Imagine the people of Göbekli Tepe gathered here under a canopy of stars, the flickering firelight making these stone foxes seem to dance and come alive. Perhaps they saw the fox not just as a clever animal, but as a protective guardian, a sentinel watching over their sacred ceremonies. It could have been a powerful totem, a spiritual guide that helped the shamans or leaders connect with the ancestors or the forces of nature. The way the foxes are depicted is also fascinating. They often have a dynamic, almost aggressive posture. This isn't just a peaceful animal grazing. It's a creature of action and power. This has led some researchers to believe the fox was part of a larger cosmic story or mythology that we've then now lost. Were they characters in an epic tale of creation or a celestial battle? The pillars at Göbekli Tepe are covered in a whole menagerie of creatures: snakes, boars, vultures, and cranes. The fox's leading role in this stone theater suggests it was a central character in their spiritual universe. Another interesting detail is that many of the foxes are depicted as male. This emphasis on a specific gender might hint at a symbolic system we don't yet understand. Was it linked to a male-dominated hunting society, or perhaps to a specific deity or ancestral figure that was male and embodied the fox's attributes? The carvings at Göbekli Tepe are like a silent language, and the fox is the most common word. We're still learning to decipher its meaning. It's also possible the fox's significance was multifaceted, changing with the context. In one ceremony, it might represent the cunning needed for a successful hunt. In another, it could be the spirit guide for a shaman's journey. Or maybe it was a clan symbol, representing a specific group of people who gathered at this monumental site. The beauty of Göbekli Tepe is that it doesn't give us easy answers. It invites us to wonder, to imagine the minds of the people who created it. The consistent presence of the fox, carved with such care and intention, is a powerful reminder of how deeply connected our ancestors were to the animal kingdom. They didn't see a clear line separating humans from nature. Animals were family, they were rivals, they were teachers, and they were gods. The fox at Göbekli Tepe is a symbol of this lost worldview, a bridge to a time when our relationship with the wild was far more intimate and spiritual. So the next time you see a fox darting across a field at dusk, take a moment. Remember these ancient carvings. You're looking at an animal that, for thousands of years, has symbolized wisdom, mystery, and the untamed spirit of the wild. It's a living link to the very dawn of human spirituality, a story etched in stone that we are only just beginning to read. The sentinel fox of Göbekli Tepe continues to watch over those ancient pillars, guarding its secrets and waiting for us to understand. What do you think the fox symbolized? Was it a guardian, a god, or something else entirely? Let me know your theories in the comments below. All right, let's venture deeper into the symbolic world of Göbekli Tepe, where the wild and the mysterious were etched into stone. Now, we're refocusing on some of the most potent and feared creatures of the ancient world, serpents and scorpions. These weren't just animals. They were powerful symbols, and their presence here tells us something profound about the minds of these early people. Picture yourself walking among these monumental pillars. As your eyes adjust to the details, you start to see them. Snakes, lots of them. They are everywhere, slithering across the stone surfaces. Sometimes they're depicted in intricate, tangled masses, a web of writhing bodies. Other times, a single serpent stands out, its form clear and deliberate. These aren't just casual doodles. The artists of Göbekli Tepe paid incredible attention to these creatures. So what did the snake mean to them? Let's unpack the layers. The most obvious association, then as now, is danger. A venomous snakebite was a death sentence in a world without modern medicine. Carving a snake was a way to acknowledge, respect, and perhaps even control this very real peril of their daily lives. It's a reminder that their world was untamed, and danger lurked underfoot. But the symbolism of the snake is rarely just about danger. It's a creature of duality. Think about how a snake sheds its skin. It sloughs off the old to reveal a fresh, new layer beneath. This act of shedding is a powerful metaphor for rebirth, renewal, and transformation. For a society on the cusp of the agricultural revolution, a society beginning to understand cycles of planting and harvesting, death and rebirth, this symbolism would have been incredibly potent. The snake embodies the endless cycle of life. Snakes are also phonic creatures. That's a fancy word, but it just means they are connected to the earth and the underworld. They emerge from holes in the ground, from the darkness beneath our feet. This links them to the mysterious hidden realms, the world of spirits, ancestors, and the unknown. In many ancient cultures, snakes were seen as guardians of sacred places or messengers between our world and the spirit world. At Göbekli Tepe, a place that feels like a gateway to another realm, the presence of so many snakes suggests they may have played a similar role here as guardians of ancient wisdom or conduits to the divine. And let's not forget fertility. The phallic shape of the snake, combined with its connection to the earth, often seen as a mother figure, has linked it to fertility and life-giving, forces across many cultures. In a community dependent on the bounty of nature, ensuring fertility of both the land and its people would have been a primary concern. The snake could have been a powerful emblem of this vital life force. So the snake at Göbekli Tepe isn't just one thing. It's a complex, multi-layered symbol of danger and death, but also of renewal, transformation, and life itself. It represents the profound dualities that these ancient people were grappling with as they tried to make sense of their world. Now let's turn our attention to another creature that commands respect and fear, the scorpion. While not as numerous as the snakes, scorpions are definitely present at Göbekli Tepe. Their unmistakable form, with its arched tail and menacing pincer carved into the stone. Like the snake, the scorpion is venomous and dangerous. Its sting is a sudden, painful reminder of the fragility of life. Its presence speaks to an environment where constant vigilance was necessary for survival. But just like the snake, the scorpion's meaning likely goes beyond mere danger. In many ancient traditions, A symbol of a dangerous thing could be used as a form of protection, a kind of spiritual antidote. Think of an amulet that uses the image of a scorpion to ward off actual scorpions, or, more broadly, to protect against evil and harmful spirits. This is known as apotropaic magic, using a like-for-like principle to create a shield. It's possible the scorpions at Göbekli Tepe served as powerful guardians, their fearsome image intended to repel negative forces from this sacred space. Scorpions are also nocturnal creatures. They thrive in the darkness, emerging when the sun goes down. This links them to the night, the moon, and the cosmos. For people who live their lives by the light of the sun, moon, and stars, the scorpion could have been a symbol of the celestial, a connection to the mysteries of the night sky. Some researchers have even proposed that certain animal constellations we recognize today might have had their origins in the minds of these prehistoric hunter-gatherers, with the scorpion being a prime candidate. Could the scorpion pillar at Göbekli Tepe be an ancient star map pointing to the constellation Scorpius? It's a fascinating theory. The combined presence of serpents and scorpions paints a vivid picture of the spiritual landscape of Göbekli Tepe. This was not a place for simple, one-dimensional ideas. It was a place where the full spectrum of existence was acknowledged and revered. These people understood that the forces that could bring death were often the same forces that brought life. The venom of the snake and scorpion represented a very real threat, but their symbolism embraced the deeper mysteries of existence, cycles of renewal, the hidden power of the underworld, and the protective forces needed to navigate a perilous world. These carvings show us a culture that was not afraid to look into the darkness. They faced the dangers of their world head-on, not by ignoring them, but by integrating them into their most sacred art and rituals. They imbued these feared creatures with profound meaning, transforming them from simple animals into cosmic symbols. The serpents and scorpions of Göbekli Tepe are a testament to the sophisticated, nuanced, and deeply spiritual worldview of our ancient ancestors. They remind us that for them, every part of the natural world, even its most dangerous aspects, was filled with power and meaning. When we gaze deeper into the painted caves and carved artifacts of our ancestors, two formidable figures emerge from the shadows, the wild boar and the aurochs. These weren't just animals. They were titans of the prehistoric world, and their frequent depiction tells us a profound story about survival, power, and respect. Let's start with the wild boar. Imagine a carving of this beast, its muscular body tense, its sharp tusks ready for a confrontation. This wasn't just a depiction of dinner. It was a symbol of raw, untamed strength and defiance. For a hunter, facing a wild boar was a life-threatening challenge. Its ferocity was legendary. By capturing its image, were early humans trying to absorb its power, to channel its aggressive spirit for a successful hunt? Or perhaps it was a totem of virility, a symbol of the tribe's own masculine strength and resilience. The boar represented a primal force of nature, a dangerous adversary that commanded both fear and admiration. Capturing its essence in art was a way to understand, respect, and perhaps even control that fearsome power. Then we have the aurochs, the colossal wild ancestor of our modern cattle. These creatures are now extinct, but their legacy thunders through prehistoric art. Picture a cave wall covered with the immense silhouette of an aurochs, its long curved horns reaching towards the ceiling. These were giants, towering over the humans who hunted them. Seeing one must have been an awe-inspiring and terrifying experience. The sheer scale of the aurochs in these paintings isn't just for accuracy. It's to convey their overwhelming presence and importance. They were a walking storehouse of sustenance, providing meat, hide, and bone for the entire community. A single successful aurochs hunt could mean the difference between thriving and starving through a harsh winter. So, when an artist painted an aurochs, they weren't just drawing an animal. They were painting security, life, and the promise of a full belly. The aurochs represented the ultimate prize, the majestic power of nature that both gave life and demanded a great struggle to obtain it. The relationship our ancestors had with these animals was deeply complex. It was a constant dance between predator and prey, a cycle of life and death that shaped their entire existence. The boar and the aurochs were not just items on a menu. They were powerful symbols woven into the very fabric of their culture and beliefs. When we see a spear aimed at an aurochs in a painting, it's not just a hunting scene. It's a drama unfolding. It's the story of human courage against immense natural power. It's a prayer for success, a record of a vital struggle, and a tribute to the magnificent beast whose life would sustain the tribe. These images highlight the delicate balance of the prehistoric world. Humans were not yet the undisputed masters of the planet. They were part of a larger, wilder system, and their art shows a profound understanding of their place within it. They recognized the strength in the boar and the life-giving abundance in the aurochs. This duality is key. On one hand, these animals represented a very real physical threat. A cornered boar or a charging aurochs was a deadly force. The artists who depicted them knew this firsthand. The tension, the power, the sense of danger is palpable in their work. But on the other hand, they were the source of survival. They provided the protein, fat, and materials necessary for life. This respect for their prey is a powerful lesson. It wasn't about domination, but about a symbiotic, albeit violent, relationship. The art suggests that early humans saw a spirit, a life force, in these creatures that was worthy of reverence. The act of painting them could have been part of a ritual, a way to mentally and spiritually prepare for the hunt, to ask for permission from the animal spirit, or to give thanks after a successful kill. Think about the skill and effort involved. An artist would venture deep into a dark cave, with only a flickering flame for light, to paint these monumental figures on the stone walls. Why? Because these animals mattered. They were central to the community's physical and spiritual well-being. The boar's image might have been invoked to bring strength to the tribe's warriors and hunters. The aurochs depiction might have been a magical appeal for abundance and prosperity. These weren't just decorations. They were active, living symbols, a bridge between the human world and the powerful forces of nature. They represent a worldview where the lines between the physical and the spiritual were blurred, where every hunt was a sacred act, and every animal was a powerful entity deserving of respect. In essence, the wild boars and aurochs in prehistoric art are not just zoological illustrations. They are windows into the minds of our ancestors. They show us what they feared, what they desired, and what they revered. They embody the raw power of the natural world and the essential struggle for survival that defined the human experience for millennia. The defiant stance of the boar speaks of courage and confrontation, while the majestic bulk of the aurochs speaks of sustenance and the awesome power of life itself. By studying these images, we connect with that ancient, vital relationship between humanity and the animal kingdom, a relationship built on a foundation of danger, necessity, and profound respect. Now we're focusing on one of its most dominant and mystifying symbols, the bird of prey. Among the incredible menagerie of animals carved into the T-shaped pillars, birds of prey, especially vultures, appear with astonishing frequency. These aren't just simple animal depictions. They are powerful, stylized, and often placed in very specific, very strange contexts. We see them alongside headless human bodies, or sometimes the birds themselves have human-like heads. It's clear these weren't just carvings of the local wildlife. They were conveying a profound message. What was it? Let's step into the mindset of a hunter-gatherer 12,000 years ago. Life and death were two sides of the same coin, a constant, observable cycle. And who is the master of this cycle? The scavenger, the vulture. These birds don't just signal death. They participate in it. They are the cleanup crew of the natural world, transforming what has ended back into life. This powerful process would not have been lost on the people of Göbekli Tepe. It's likely they saw these birds as sacred transformers, beings that could interact with the boundary between the living world and the great beyond. One of the most compelling theories is that these vulture carvings depict an early form of excarnation, or what's sometimes called a sky burial. This is a funeral practice where a deceased person's body is placed on a high, open-air location to be consumed by scavenging birds. While we don't have direct evidence of this at Göbekli Tepe itself, the iconography is incredibly suggestive. The famous vulture stone, Pillar 43, shows a large vulture standing next to a headless human figure. Many archaeologists interpret this not as a scene of violence, but as a ritual scene. The headless body could represent a soul that has departed, and the vulture is the agent of that transition, the sacred being that carries the essence of the deceased away from the physical realm. Think about it. The bird takes the flesh, allowing the spirit or soul to be freed and ascend to the heavens. In this view, the vulture isn't a terrifying predator, but a psychopomp, a Greek term for a guide of souls. Like Hermes in Greek mythology or Anubis in Egyptian lore, these birds were seen as intermediaries, creatures that could travel between the earthly plane and the spirit world. Their ability to soar high into the sky, disappearing into the blue expanse, would have reinforced this belief. They were quite literally messengers to the heavens, the only beings who could physically bridge the gap between humanity on the ground and the cosmos above. This idea of a sky burial and vultures as psychopomps is supported by practices in other ancient cultures. For example, the Zoroastrians of Persia have long practiced a similar form of excarnation in structures called towers of silence. Even closer to home, wall paintings from Catalyük, a Neolithic city in modern-day Turkey that came thousands of years after Göbekli Tepe, also depict large birds hovering over headless human bodies. It seems this was a deeply rooted belief system in the ancient Near East, a sophisticated cosmology that saw death not as an end, but as a journey facilitated by these magnificent winged creatures. Let's look closer at the art itself. The vultures at Göbekli Tepe are often depicted with exaggerated features, huge, powerful wings, and sharp, menacing beaks. Their presence is dominant, almost overwhelming. This isn't just a naturalist sketch. It's a statement of power and spiritual significance. The repetition of this motif across different enclosures suggests it was a central tenet of their belief system. The headless bodies found alongside them aren't shown in poses of struggle. Instead, they seem passive, part of a structured, ritualistic process. The focus is on the transformation, the journey, and the vulture is the star of that show. So, why headless bodies? In many ancient cultures, the head was considered the seat of the soul or life essence. The removal of the head, either ritually or as part of the burial process, could symbolize the final separation of the spirit from the physical body. Some researchers have even speculated that skulls were collected and used in other rituals, perhaps as a way to venerate ancestors. The headless body, then, becomes a vessel for which the soul has departed, and the vulture is the divine vehicle for its journey. The people of Göbekli Tepe possessed a complex and deeply symbolic understanding of the universe. They didn't just see a bird. They saw a key player in the cosmos, a sacred link in the great chain of being. These carvings aren't just art. They are theological texts written in stone. They tell us that 12,000 years ago, our ancestors were grappling with the same big questions we do today. What happens after we die? What is our place in the universe? And how do we connect with the divine? Their answer, it seems, was written on the wings of a vulture, soaring high into the heavens. The next time you see one, maybe you'll see it a little differently, too, not just as a scavenger, but as a timeless symbol of transformation and a messenger between worlds. We're shifting our focus to something even more enigmatic, the rare but powerful depictions of humans, or at least humanoid forms. While animals clearly dominate the landscape of Göbekli Tepe, the artists of this prehistoric society didn't just stop there. They carved abstract symbols and, most intriguingly, simplified human-like figures. This is where things get really fascinating. Have you ever looked closely at the T-pillars themselves? Many leading archaeologists theorize that these massive stones aren't just architectural supports. They believe the pillars themselves are stylized representations of human beings. Think about it. A long vertical body with a wider section at the top like a head in profile. And if you look at the sides of some pillars, you'll see long, slender reliefs that look remarkably like arms, bent at the elbow, with hands and fingers wrapping around the front, pointing towards the navel area. It's as if these towering stone giants are standing in a silent, eternal assembly, watching over the sacred space. They aren't just holding up the roof. They asterisk the congregation. But the human story doesn't end with the pillars themselves. Among the carvings, we find other, more explicit human elements that are just as puzzling. For instance, there are depictions of human heads. These aren't detailed portraits, but they are unmistakably human. They've been found as separate stone carvings, sometimes placed within the temple walls, almost like offerings or focal points for rituals. What did these heads signify? Were they representations of revered ancestors, their wisdom preserved in stone? Or perhaps they were depictions of powerful shamans or spiritual leaders who guided the community. Then we have the opposite and equally perplexing phenomenon: headless bodies. Yes, you heard that right. Some carvings show human figures deliberately depicted without a head. One famous relief shows a small headless figure surrounded by vultures. This has sparked intense debate. In many ancient cultures, vultures were associated with death and the journey to the afterlife, as they would consume the flesh of the deceased in what's known as excarnation or sky burial. Could this carving be a literal depiction of a funeral rite practiced by the people of Göbekli Tepe? It's a powerful and visceral image that suggests a deep and complex understanding of life, death, and the soul's journey. The absence of a head could also have a symbolic meaning. In many spiritual traditions, the head is the seat of the individual ego. By removing it, the art might be emphasizing a collective identity or a connection to a spirit world that transcends the individual self. These headless figures could represent not specific people, but spiritual beings, ancestors, or even deities in a non-naturalistic symbolic form. What's so compelling about all this is the blurring of boundaries. We have pillars that are both architecture and human figures. We see animals carved with incredible realism, and then we have humans shown in abstract, symbolic ways, sometimes just as a head, sometimes without one at all. This suggests a worldview where the lines between human, animal, and spirit were not as clearly defined as they are for us today. The people of Göbekli Tepe may have believed that humans could take on animal characteristics, or that spirits could manifest in human form. Imagine the rituals that might have taken place in these enclosures, surrounded by these silent stone figures. The flickering firelight would have made the carvings of lions, boars, and snakes seem to move on the stone. And in the center of it all, these towering human-like pillars and strange depictions of heads and headless bodies would have created an atmosphere of profound mystery and power. Were they telling stories, reenacting myths, communicating with their ancestors or their gods? These humanoid representations are crucial clues. They move the narrative of Göbekli Tepe beyond just a zoo in stone or a hunter's paradise. They point towards a deeply complex spiritual and ceremonial life, filled with sophisticated concepts about identity, the afterlife, and the very nature of humanity. They show us a people grappling with the biggest questions of existence, just as we do today, but expressing their answers in a language of stone and symbol that we are only just beginning to decipher. The human element at Göbekli Tepe is a reminder that these were not just abstract builders. They were people with beliefs, fears, and a rich inner world. The stylized figures, the disembodied heads, and the headless bodies all whisper of a complex social and spiritual narrative that we are painstakingly piecing together, one stone at a time. It's a puzzle that stretches our imagination and challenges our assumptions about the dawn of civilization. When we move beyond looking at individual animal carvings and start seeing the bigger picture, a hidden language begins to emerge. It's all about the patterns, the repeating motifs that whisper secrets across the millennia. On Pillar 43, for example, we see this incredible dense collection of creatures. There's a vulture, a scorpion, and what some interpret as a headless human figure. But this isn't just a random zoo carved in stone. These symbols appear together and in similar arrangements on other pillars as well. It's like seeing the same 3 emojis pop up in a text message from a friend. You know they mean something specific when used together. At Göbekli Tepe, it could be a snake, a fox, and a wild boar appearing as a trio, or a particular bird symbol always positioned above a certain quadruped. Why this repetition? Why this specific grouping? This isn't just decoration. This is deliberate communication. Think of it as a prehistoric grammar. Each animal might be a word with its own meaning, but the way they are arranged, the way they are grouped together, forms a sentence. These repeated clusters of symbols are the syntax of a lost spiritual language. The builders of Göbekli Tepe weren't just carving animals they saw. They were writing their beliefs, their myths, their understanding of the cosmos onto these massive T-shaped pillars. They were telling a story, and the key to reading it lies in recognizing these recurring patterns. Let's dive deeper into this idea of a pictorial language. In linguistics, syntax is the set of rules that governs the structure of sentences. What if the enclosures at Göbekli Tepe acted like chapters in a book, each with its own thematic focus? Perhaps Enclosure D, with its famous Pillar 43, tells one part of a grand cosmic story, while Enclosure C tells another. The consistent placement of certain symbols within specific enclosures could signify their importance to that particular part of the narrative. For instance, the sheer number of snake carvings is astounding. They slither across pillars, often interwoven with other animals. But they aren't just randomly placed. Their position relative to other creatures might change the entire meaning. A snake below a fox might signify something entirely different than a snake depicted beside a gazelle. We're not just identifying animals. We're analyzing relationships. We read trying to reconstruct the thought process of people who lived in a world so different from our own, a world where these symbols were as intuitive to them as letters are to us. This concept completely revolutionizes how we view prehistoric art. It's not just art for art's sake. It's information. It's a complex system of knowledge transfer. These ancient hunter-gatherers were conveying abstract ideas about life, death, the cosmos, and perhaps the very forces of nature they sought to understand and influence. The arrangement of a vulture, a scorpion, and a headless man could be a story about death and transformation, or an astronomical event linked to a specific constellation that held deep cultural meaning. Unraveling these patterns is like being a detective, a linguist, and an art historian all rolled into one. We're searching for the Rosetta Stone of the Stone Age. Every new discovery, every newly unearthed pillar that shows a familiar grouping adds another piece to the puzzle. It strengthens the theory that we are looking at a coherent symbolic system. The repetition is the proof. It's the echo of a voice calling out from the dawn of civilization, telling us that they had something important to say. Consider the fox. It's another frequently depicted animal, often shown with a sense of dynamic movement. On some pillars, multiple foxes seem to chase each other, creating a circular flow of energy. What did the fox represent? A trickster spirit? A guardian? A symbol of a particular clan or season? When we see it consistently paired with, say, a crane, we have to ask, what is the relationship? Is it a mythological event? A seasonal observation? A clan alliance? The possibilities are endless, but they are not random. The patterns guide our interpretations. This symbolic language might also have been a way to structure their society and their rituals. Imagine a ritual leader standing in the center of one of these enclosures, pointing to the pillars and recounting the sacred stories encoded on them. The carvings would serve as a mnemonic device, a visual script for the oral traditions that held their community together. The repetition of symbols would reinforce the core tenets of their belief system, ensuring that the sacred knowledge was passed down accurately from one generation to the next. We are essentially trying to learn the vocabulary and grammar of a completely alien, yet profoundly human language. Each pillar is a page, each enclosure a chapter, and Göbekli Tepe itself is a library of stone. A library filled with the foundational stories of a people on the cusp of changing the world forever. The more we study these repeating motifs, the closer we get to hearing their voices and understanding the message they worked so hard to preserve in stone. They weren't just hunters. They were thinkers, they were astronomers, they were storytellers. And they left us their epic, waiting 12,000 years for us to learn how to read it. In our last segment, we marveled at the individual symbols carved into these ancient pillars. But what happens when we step back and look at how these symbols are arranged together? We move beyond single images and into the realm of stories narratives etched in stone, frozen for over 11,000 years. Some of these carvings aren't just isolated figures. They seem to depict scenes, interactions, a sequence of events. It's like discovering a prehistoric comic strip, but one that holds the secrets to a lost world's beliefs and myths. Imagine walking up to a pillar and seeing not just a fox, but a fox seemingly interacting with a crane and a wild boar. Are they characters in a story? Is this a fable passed down through generations? A lesson about the natural world? Or perhaps even a memory of a specific event? One of the most captivating examples is on Pillar 43, often called the Vulture Stone. Here we see a stunningly complex scene. A headless human figure is depicted, surrounded by various animals, most prominently a large vulture. Scholars have debated this image for years. Could it represent a celestial event, like a comet strike, as some have suggested? Or does it depict an early form of a sky burial ritual, where the bodies of the deceased were left for vultures to consume, a practice seen in other ancient cultures? The vulture, in this context, might not be a threat, but a sacred creature, a psychopomp guiding the soul to the afterlife. This single panel could be a window into their entire philosophy of life, death, and the cosmos. But the stories don't stop there. On other pillars, we find combinations of symbols that seem less like a random collection and more like a deliberate narrative. Picture a sequence: a line of ducks, a serpent, and a powerful auroch. Is this a depiction of a creation myth? Perhaps the serpent represents the underworld or water, the ducks the sky, and the auroch the power of the land. Arranged together, they could be telling the epic story of how the world came to be, according to the people who built this incredible site. It's a form of visual storytelling that predates written language by millennia. Think about the power of that. These hunter-gatherers didn't just have the skill to build these monumental structures. They had a rich, shared mythology. They had stories they deemed so important, so central to their identity, that they went to extraordinary lengths to carve them into these massive stone pillars for all to see. These weren't just decorations. They were public declarations of their culture's most profound beliefs. They were a way of cementing their collective memory and passing it on to future generations. Let's consider the depiction of a successful hunt. We see carvings of powerful animals like wild boars and gazelles, sometimes with nets or projectiles nearby. Are these simply portrayals of the animals they hunted? Or are they commemorative scenes? Perhaps a specific carving immortalizes a legendary hunt, a moment of great triumph and provision for the community. It would have served as both a historical record and an inspiration, a reminder of their skill, bravery, and their intimate connection with the animal world. These scenes would have reinforced social bonds, celebrated their heroes, and taught essential survival skills through the epic medium of stone carving. We also find scenes that might represent rituals. Imagine a carving showing a group of animals seemingly moving in a procession towards a central point. Could this represent a sacrificial rite, an offering to the spirits or gods they believed in? The arrangement and interaction of the figures suggest a planned ceremonial event. These wouldn't be simple animal pictures. They would be liturgical texts written in the language of images. Deciphering them is like trying to understand the rituals of a lost religion. We can only speculate, but every interpretation brings us closer to the spiritual pulse of this ancient society. One of the most fascinating aspects of these narrative scenes is what they tell us about the human mind at this pivotal moment in history. The ability to create and understand a narrative, a story with a beginning, a middle, and an end, is a massive cognitive leap. It's the foundation of everything from mythology and religion to history and science. Göbekli Tepe shows us that 11,000 years ago, our ancestors weren't just surviving. They were thinking in complex, abstract terms. They were creating shared realities through stories. These carvings are the earliest evidence we have of this kind of sophisticated, collective imagination being expressed on such a monumental scale. It's a tantalizing puzzle. We are archaeologists of the mind, trying to reconstruct a belief system from fragmented visual clues. Each pillar is a page from a sacred book we can't fully read. But even the fragments are breathtaking. They hint at a world rich with meaning, where animals were not just food, but characters in a cosmic drama, where the stars told stories, and where stone was a canvas for the soul of a people. These stories in stone transform Göbekli Tepe from a mere architectural wonder into a library of ancient thought. It's a testament to the timeless human need to make sense of the world, to share our experiences, and to leave a mark that says, "We were here, and this is what we believed." The people of Göbekli Tepe may be long gone, but their stories, carved with such care and intention, continue to speak to us across the vast expanse of time. In our previous discussions, we've marveled at the stunning animal carvings that adorn these ancient pillars. But now, we're venturing into an even more mysterious realm, a world of symbols that don't depict living creatures. We're talking about the abstract glyphs and geometric shapes scattered across the site. These aren't just random doodles. They are deliberate, carefully carved marks that hint at a complex system of thought we are only just beginning to comprehend. Get ready, because we're about to decode the unknown script of Göbekli Tepe. So, what exactly are these symbols? Imagine standing before one of these colossal T-shaped pillars. Alongside the familiar fox or the menacing boar, you notice other stranger markings. There are symbols that look strikingly like the letter H, both in its standard form and lying on its side. Elsewhere, you see crescents, discs, and intricate patterns of lines and dots. These aren't isolated incidents. They appear on multiple pillars and smaller artifacts found at the site. They are a deliberate and recurring part of the symbolic language of these ancient people. Unlike the animal carvings, which we can at least identify, these abstract glyphs are a complete enigma. They are a silent script, and for thousands of years, its meaning has been lost to time. What were the builders of Göbekli Tepe trying to tell us with these strange and beautiful forms? Let's start with one of the most common and intriguing symbols, the H shape. These appear frequently, sometimes standing alone, sometimes in pairs, and sometimes integrated with animal reliefs. What could they possibly represent? One compelling theory is that they are a form of dualism. Think of it as a representation of opposites, male and female, life and death, day and night, or perhaps two different clans or tribes coming together. It could be a symbol of union or connection. Imagine a ritual taking place here, where two groups meet under this sign of partnership. It's a powerful idea that 12,000 years ago, people were already thinking in these sophisticated, dualistic terms and had a specific symbol to represent it. This wasn't just us and them. It was a recognition of a fundamental balance in the universe. Another fascinating theory ties these symbols to the sky. The crescent shapes, for instance, are almost universally interpreted as lunar symbols. It's easy to imagine these early hunter-gatherers living their lives under the vast, open sky, being deeply attuned to the cycles of the moon. The moon would have governed their nights, influenced animal behavior, and perhaps even marked the passage of time for rituals and gatherings. But it doesn't stop with the moon. Some researchers, like Graham Hancock, have proposed that Göbekli Tepe as a whole is an astronomical observatory. In this context, the abstract glyphs could be celestial markers. The disks might represent the sun or other bright stars. The arrangements of dots and lines could be primitive star maps, perhaps charting constellations that were important to their mythology. There's even a famous pillar, Pillar 43, often called the Vulture Stone, which some believe depicts a comet impact that caused a catastrophic climate event thousands of years ago, using animal figures as zodiacal symbols. While highly debated, this theory places the abstract glyphs right at the center of a prehistoric cosmic map. It suggests these people weren't just observing the Earth around them, but were also looking up, trying to understand their place in the cosmos. But what if the answer is less about the sky and more about the people themselves? Another strong possibility is that these glyphs served as clan totems or emblems. In many pre-literate societies, specific symbols are used to identify different families, tribes, or social groups. The H symbol could have represented one clan, while a crescent might have represented another. Göbekli Tepe was a massive regional gathering place. It would have made perfect sense for different groups traveling from afar to mark their presence or their dedicated pillar with their unique sign. This would make the site a sort of symbolic tapestry, weaving together the identities of the diverse communities who built and used this incredible temple complex. The symbols would be a declaration. We were here. We contributed. This is our mark. It transforms the pillars from simple religious icons into a social register, a record of community and collaboration, written in a language of symbols. Then, there's the most tantalizing possibility of all. Could these be the very first steps toward writing? Let's be clear, this is not a fully developed script like cuneiform or hieroglyphics. But writing doesn't just appear out of nowhere. It evolves from earlier systems of symbolic representation, known as proto-writing. These systems use symbols to convey information without being directly tied to a spoken language. The abstract glyphs at Göbekli Tepe fit this description perfectly. A sequence of symbols might not spell out a word, but it could convey a concept, like two clans meet under the full moon for a feast. The repetition and combination of these glyphs suggest a system. The builders were using a standardized set of symbols to record and transmit complex ideas. This would push back the origins of information technology by thousands of years. It suggests that the cognitive leap required for writing, the ability to let a symbol stand for an idea, was made not by settled farmers, but by the hunter-gatherers who preceded them. Göbekli Tepe could be the place where humanity first learned to write down its thoughts, not with letters, but with the powerful, silent language of abstract signs. Of course, we must also consider that these symbols may have a meaning that is purely spiritual and abstract, something we can never fully translate into our modern terms. They could be representations of spiritual concepts, portals to another world, or diagrams of the soul's journey. Think of them not as a code to be cracked, but as art to be experienced. These shapes might have been used in rituals, perhaps traced with the finger during a chant, to help focus the mind and connect with the divine. Their power might not lie in a specific translatable meaning, but in their ability to evoke a sense of awe, mystery, and the sacred. In this view, trying to define what an H symbol asterisk means asterisk is missing the point. Its purpose was to asterisk be asterisk, to exist as a powerful, non-representational form that pointed towards the ineffable, the world beyond the physical. It's a testament to the human capacity for abstract thought, for finding meaning, not just in the world we see, but in the world we feel and imagine. The presence of these abstract glyphs, alongside the animal reliefs, adds a profound layer of complexity to Göbekli Tepe. It shows us that the builders had two parallel symbolic systems running at the same time. One was grounded in the observable world of animals, a world they knew intimately as hunters. The other was a world of pure abstraction, of concepts, cosmology, and social identity. This dualism is the key. It suggests society with a deeply sophisticated worldview, capable of holding multiple layers of meaning at once. They weren't just primitive hunters. They were artists, astronomers, engineers, and philosophers. They were grappling with the biggest questions of existence, and they created a complex, dual symbolic language to explore them. The animals might represent the soul's journey in the spirit world, while the glyphs mapped out that world's fundamental laws and structure. Ultimately, the true meaning of these geometric shapes and abstract glyphs may forever remain a mystery. Without a Rosetta Stone for Göbekli Tepe, we are left with compelling theories and educated guesses. But the lack of a definitive answer is precisely what makes them so captivating. These symbols challenge our assumptions about the past and the capabilities of early human societies. They prove that long before cities and empires, our ancestors possessed a rich and complex symbolic world. They could think abstractly, record information systematically, and express profound ideas about their cosmos, their society, and their spiritual beliefs. The unknown script of Göbekli Tepe is a silent testament to the dawn of the human imagination. It's a puzzle 12,000 years in the making, and we are the lucky ones who get to try and solve it. Imagine different groups of hunter-gatherers, each identifying with a specific animal. You might have the fox clan, known for their cleverness, or the wild boar clan, respected for their strength and tenacity. Perhaps the snake clan, revered for their connection to transformation and the underworld. These weren't just mascots. These animals were family. They were believed to be distant ancestors, spiritual protectors, and the very embodiment of the clan's character and spirit. The qualities of the animal, its fierceness, its cunning, its grace, were the qualities the people aspired to. This idea of totemism completely changes how we see Göbekli Tepe. It transforms it from a mysterious temple into a grand meeting place, a prehistoric United Nations, if you will. This wasn't just a place for abstract rituals. It was a place where identities were displayed, acknowledged, and celebrated. Think about it. Groups would travel for miles to gather here. How would they recognize each other? By their symbols. The pillar carved with a soaring vulture might mark the gathering spot for the vulture clan, while the one with the scorpion could be the designated area for the scorpion clan. This visual language would have been instantly understood by everyone present. It was a way of saying, "We are the people of the fox," or "We honor the spirit of the aurochs." This would have created a powerful sense of belonging and social cohesion. In a world without nations or kings, your clan was your identity, and your totem was its sacred banner. Göbekli Tepe was the stage where these identities were performed and reinforced. It was a place for different lineages to come together, perhaps to trade, to arrange marriages, or to perform ceremonies that strengthened their alliances and their shared worldview. Let's dig a little deeper into this. The choice of animal wasn't random. A group living in a dense forest might identify with the boar, an animal they frequently encountered and respected for its power. A clan living in the open plains might see the gazelle, with its speed and elegance, as their spiritual kin. These totems connected people directly to their environment, making the natural world an integral part of their social fabric. The animal wasn't just asterisk on asterisk the stone. It was asterisk in asterisk their blood, a living link to their ancestors and their land. The placement of these carvings could also tell a story. Perhaps a pillar showing a fox and a crane together commemorates an alliance or a marriage between those two clans. Maybe a scene depicting a boar being attacked by smaller animals isn't a hunt, but a mythological story about the origin of a clan, or a ritual drama acted out during gatherings. The pillars become a library of social history, recording the relationships and stories of the people. This theory suggests that the primary purpose of Göbekli Tepe might have been social and political as much as it was religious. It was the glue that held these early societies together. By carving their ancestral totems into these monumental stones, the builders of Göbekli Tepe were making a permanent statement. They were saying, "We were here. This is who we are. This is our ancestor." They were literally setting their identity in stone for eternity. This act of carving was an act of remembering, ensuring that the stories and lineage of the clan would not be forgotten. Each pillar became a monument to a family line, a stone ancestor watching over its descendants. It created a sense of shared heritage and a common purpose that was powerful enough to mobilize hundreds of people for this incredible construction project. So when we look at the fox, the serpent, and the vulture of Göbekli Tepe, we're not just seeing animals. We're potentially seeing the faces of the people themselves. We're witnessing a complex social system where identity was woven from kinship, spirituality, and the natural world. This site was a vibrant tapestry of clans, each with its own story, its own spirit animal, coming together under the stars to affirm their place in the cosmos and their connection to one another. The animal carvings were the threads that held this incredible human tapestry together. This idea of totemic identity helps explain the sheer scale and effort involved. Building Göbekli Tepe was a massive undertaking. Why do it? To honor a shared ancestor, to solidify the identity of your clan for all time, and to create a central place for your people to gather. These are powerful motivators. It fostered a collective identity that transcended small family groups, enabling the cooperation needed for such a monumental project. The stones didn't just hold up a roof. They held up a society. They were the physical manifestation of the bonds that connected these people. This theory provides a rich human context for the stones. It moves beyond abstract gods and brings us closer to the people. We can almost hear them telling their children the story of the great auroch, their clan's first ancestor, as they point to its powerful image on a T-pillar. We can imagine the pride they felt seeing their clan's totem carved into this magnificent central sanctuary. Göbekli Tepe, through this lens, becomes a testament to one of humanity's deepest needs, the need to belong, to know who you are, and to have a place in the world. And for these ancient people, that identity was etched in the form of the wild animals they lived alongside. Ever wondered what truly lies behind those breathtaking prehistoric animal paintings? Are they just a record of a successful hunt, or something far more profound? Let's journey back in time, not just to look at these images, but to try and understand the minds that created them. The sheer power and detail in the animal symbolism point towards a spiritual practice we now call shamanism. We're about to step into the world of ancient spirit walkers. Imagine this: deep within the flickering firelight of a cave, a shaman, a respected member of the tribe, begins their journey. This isn't a physical journey, but one of the mind, a deep trance state. Their goal? To connect with the spirit world, a realm believed to exist alongside our own. And the key to this realm was through the animal spirits. The paintings on these cave walls weren't just art. They were portals, conduits of power. So, who were these shamans? They were the healers, the visionaries, the mediators between the human and the supernatural. In a world fraught with danger, where the success of a hunt or the change of seasons could mean the difference between life and death, the shaman's role was crucial. They sought knowledge, healing, and influence over the forces of nature. To do this, they had to cross the veil, to enter a reality where animals didn't just walk the earth, but also held immense spiritual power. The animals depicted aren't random. Each one likely held a specific meaning, a particular power. Think of the mighty bison, a symbol of strength, endurance, and provision. A shaman might seek the bison's spirit to ensure a successful hunt for their people, to borrow its strength in a time of scarcity. Or consider the horse, often depicted with a sense of motion and freedom. Perhaps the horse was a spirit guide, a psychopomp, capable of carrying the shaman's soul swiftly across the spiritual landscape to other realms. And what about the more elusive creatures? The deer, with its keen senses and graceful movement, could represent intuition and gentleness. The great cave bears, powerful and hibernating, might have symbolized death and rebirth, the cycle of seasons, and the power of the subconscious world. The shaman wouldn't just observe these animals. They would seek to become them, to embody their essence. This transformation was a core part of the shamanic experience. Through dance, chanting, and possibly the use of natural psychoactive substances, the shaman would shed their human form and take on the perspective of the animal spirit. This transformative journey is often what we see hinted at in the art itself. Have you ever noticed figures in cave art that are part human, part animal? These are often called therianthropes. One of the most famous is the sorcerer from the cave of Trois Frères in France. This figure has the antlers of a stag, the eyes of an owl, the paws of a bear, and the tail of a horse. This isn't a monster. It's likely a depiction of a shaman in the midst of their spiritual transformation, embodying the powers of multiple spirit guides at once. It's a snapshot of a sacred ritual, frozen in time on the cave wall. These hybrid figures suggest that the shaman's journey was not just about seeking help from spirits, but about absorbing their power, their wisdom, their very being. By wearing the animal, the shaman could see with its eyes, run with its speed, and understand its world. This was the ultimate form of empathy and connection, a way to dissolve the boundaries between human and nature, subject and object. The world was not seen as a collection of resources, but as a living, breathing network of spirits, all interconnected. Now, let's think about the location itself. Why these deep, dark, often inaccessible caves? These weren't living spaces. They were sacred sanctuaries. The journey into the earth, away from the light of the sun, was a symbolic act in itself. It was a descent into the womb of Mother Earth, a place of creation and mystery. The deep silence, the echoes, the strange mineral formations, all would have contributed to an altered state of consciousness, making it easier for the shaman to enter their trance. These caves were liminal spaces, a term anthropologists use for places that are in between. They are thresholds between one world and another. In this case, the cave was the physical threshold where the veil between the human world and the spirit world was believed to be exceptionally thin. The animal paintings weren't just decorations. They activated the space. They were the very fabric of that veil, the faces of the spirits looking back from the other side. By painting them, the artists were not just representing the spirit world. They were making it present, bringing it into being within that sacred space. The act of painting itself was a ritual, mixing the pigments from ochre, charcoal, and manganese, using animal fat as a binder, and applying it to the wall with brushes made of twigs or animal hair. Every step was imbued with intention. The shaman artist would be chanting, praying, and focusing their energy as they brought the animal spirit to life on the rock. The painting was a prayer, an invocation, a pact. Once completed, the image held power. It became a focal point for future rituals, a permanent connection to the spirit it represented. So, when we look at a panel of painted horses, we're not just seeing a herd. We're looking at a congregation of spirit guides, a source of spiritual power that a community could draw upon for generations. The cave was a library of spiritual knowledge, a cathedral of sacred power, and the shamans were its keepers. They would return to these images time and again, to renew their connection, to seek guidance for new challenges, and to initiate the next generation into these ancient mysteries. This shamanistic interpretation gives the art a dynamic, living quality. It transforms the static images into a screenplay of spiritual drama, a guide to the human soul's most profound journeys. It explains the layering of images, where new animals are painted over older ones, not as vandalism. It gives meaning to the handprints often found alongside the animals, as if the artists were literally touching the spirit world, leaving their mark on the threshold. This journey into the spirit world tells us something essential about our ancestors. They lived in a world alive with meaning, where every rock, every animal, and every shadow held a deeper significance. Their survival was tied not just to their physical skill, but to their spiritual resilience. The shaman's journey was a testament to the human imagination's power to find meaning, to connect with the universe, and to navigate the great mysteries of existence. And through their art, they left us a timeless invitation to do the same. We've explored its stunning art and monumental scale, but today we re-diving into one of its most mind-bending secrets. Was this ancient sanctuary also the world's first astronomical observatory? Some researchers believe the answer is a resounding yes. They propose that the precise arrangement of these massive T-shaped pillars and the cryptic animal carvings aren't random at all. Instead, they might be a sophisticated system for tracking celestial events. Let's put ourselves in the shoes of the people who built this. These weren't city dwellers with written language and advanced mathematics as we know them. They were hunter-gatherers, their lives intricately woven into the fabric of the natural world. Their survival depended on understanding the seasons. When would the migratory herds return? When would certain plants be ready to harvest? Knowing the answers to these questions was a matter of life and death. And what's the most reliable clock in nature? The sky. The sun's path across the sky changes throughout the year, marking the longest day, the solstice, and the equal days and nights of the equinoxes. These aren't just abstract concepts. They are tangible turning points in the year. The summer solstice means long days for hunting and gathering. The winter solstice signals the coming of the coldest, darkest part of the year, a time to rely on stored food and shared warmth. Now, look again at the circular enclosures at Göbekli Tepe. The theory is that some of these structures are deliberately aligned to these key solar events. Imagine standing within enclosure D on the day of the summer solstice. As the sun rises, its first rays might have perfectly illuminated a specific pillar, or shone directly through a gap between two central monoliths. This wasn't just a pretty light show. It was a sacred announcement. It was the universe confirming that the cycle was turning, that the world was in order. This act of observing would have been a powerful ritual, reinforcing their connection to the cosmos and the rhythms that governed their lives. But the sun might not be the only star of this show. What about the other celestial bodies? The moon, with its own predictable phases, and the dazzling star fields of the pre-industrial night sky would have been just as important. Some researchers have focused on specific bright stars. For example, some have suggested that certain enclosures were aligned to the rising of Sirius, the brightest star in our night sky. For ancient cultures like the Egyptians, the heliacal rising of Sirius heralded the annual flooding of the Nile. Could it have held a similar significance for the people of Göbekli Tepe, perhaps signaling the start of a particular animal migration? This brings us to the incredible animal carvings. We've admired them as works of art, but what if they were also star maps? What if these weren't just pictures of animals, but representations of constellations? This idea is known as archaeoastronomy. Think about it. We see a lion in the constellation Leo, a scorpion in Scorpius. Our own zodiac is a collection of animal symbols projected onto the stars. Why couldn't the builders of Göbekli Tepe have done the same? One of the most compelling pieces of evidence for this comes from the famous vulture stone, Pillar 43. This pillar is covered in fascinating imagery. A scorpion, a bird, and most notably, a headless human figure alongside a large vulture. One provocative theory suggests this stone is a date stamp for a cataclysmic event. The animals, in this interpretation, represent constellations, the scorpion for Scorpius, the bird for Sagittarius, and so on. The arrangement of these constellations on the stone, the theory goes, matches the arrangement of the actual stars in the sky around 10,950 BC. This date coincides with the Younger Dryas, a period of abrupt and dramatic climate change. Could the vulture stone be a memorial, historian stone, recording a cosmic impact event that changed their world forever? It's a breathtaking idea. It transforms Göbekli Tepe from a passive temple into an active center of knowledge. It suggests a level of intellectual sophistication that is simply staggering for its time. These hunter-gatherers weren't just surviving. They were observing, recording, and codifying the very laws of the universe as they understood them. The pillars become more than just stone. They become celestial markers, and the enclosures become giant open-air planetariums. Of course, these are theories, and they are hotly debated in the archaeological community. Proving astronomical alignments from 12,000 years ago is incredibly difficult. The site has been altered by time, seismic activity, and the very act of its burial. Alignments could be coincidental, and without a written language, a Rosetta Stone for their symbols, we are left to interpret their meaning based on patterns and educated hypotheses. Some scholars argue for a more terrestrial interpretation, suggesting the animals represent clan totems, shamanic spirits, or simply the dangerous and powerful fauna of their world. But whether you subscribe to the astronomical theories or not, they force us to ask a powerful question. What is the purpose of monumental architecture? Is it just about faith, or is it also about knowledge? At Göbekli Tepe, the two seem to be inseparable. The sacred and the scientific were not separate domains. They were one and the same. Charting the cosmos was a holy act. Understanding the seasons was a form of communion with the divine forces that shape their world. This temple of the stars would have been the intellectual and spiritual heart of their society. It was a place where knowledge was kept, where time was measured, and where the community gathered to reaffirm its place in the grand cosmic order. The rituals performed here, timed by the movements of the sun and stars, would have bound the community together, connecting their earthly lives to the celestial cycles. Göbekli Tepe might just be the oldest evidence we have of humanity as unending quest to understand our place in the universe. Every single one of these creatures wasn't just a source of food or a potential threat. They were symbols, each carrying a universe of meaning. Think about it. The survival of the community depended on understanding these animals, their habits, their strengths, their very essence. This deep, intimate knowledge wasn't just practical. It was spiritual. It bled into every aspect of their lives, their beliefs, and their rituals. The builders of Göbekli Tepe didn't just observe nature from a distance. They were an integral part of it. The lines between human, animal, and spirit were beautifully blurred. So, when they carved these animals onto the megaliths, they weren't just creating a prehistoric art gallery. These weren't simple decorations. They were channeling the very spirit of the wild into their sacred space. Each carving was a portal, an extension of their intimate, daily relationship with the land and its powerful inhabitants. The pillars themselves become a part of the ecosystem, not just representations of it. The act of carving was an act of worship, a way to honor the forces of nature that governed their existence. It was a way to bring the power of the wild boar, the cunning of the fox, and the soaring spirit of the vulture right into the heart of their ceremonial life. Let's delve deeper into this idea of a sacred landscape. The location of Göbekli Tepe itself is significant. It sits atop a hill, offering a commanding view of the surrounding plains. From here, they could watch the seasons change, track the movement of animal herds, and observe the stars. This wasn't just a good vantage point. It was a place where heaven and earth seemed to meet. By building their temple here, they were placing themselves at the center of their cosmic world, with the animal spirits carved on the pillars, acting as intermediaries between the human realm and the divine forces of nature. The animals chosen for depiction are also telling. We don't see many depictions of prey animals in a passive state. Instead, we see powerful, often dangerous creatures. The scorpion, the snake, the boar, these are animals that command respect and caution. They represent the untamed, unpredictable aspects of nature. By carving them, perhaps the builders were seeking to understand, appease, or even harness these formidable powers. It suggests a worldview where power wasn't something to be dominated, but something to be respected and negotiated with. They saw the animal kingdom not as a resource to be exploited, but as a community of powerful beings, each with its own wisdom and spiritual significance. This integration of environment and spirituality is a fundamental shift in how we've often viewed our prehistoric ancestors. They weren't just struggling for survival, cowering in caves. They were sophisticated thinkers, astronomers, and artists who possessed a rich and complex inner world. They looked at the world around them and saw a living, breathing entity filled with meaning and spirit. The animals were their teachers, their guides, and their fellow inhabitants of a sacred world. The carvings are the echoes of their chants, the shadows of their rituals, the lasting proof of a worldview where humanity was not separate from nature, but deeply, inextricably woven into its fabric. Think about the sheer effort involved. Quarrying, transporting, and erecting these massive stone pillars, some weighing up to 20 tons, required immense social organization and a powerful, unifying purpose. What could be so important? The answer seems to lie in this spiritual connection to the animal world. This wasn't a project for shelter or defense. It was a project for the soul. It was about creating a physical manifestation of their beliefs, a place where they could connect with the animal spirits that gave their world meaning and order. Göbekli Tepe was their cathedral, and the animals were their saints and angels. This monument fundamentally challenges the idea that complex religion only followed the invention of agriculture. Here, we have hunter-gatherers building a massive temple complex, suggesting that a sophisticated spiritual and symbolic system was the very thing that brought people together, paving the way for settled life, not the other way around. Their shared reverence for the animal world, expressed so powerfully at Göbekli Tepe, may have been the cultural glue that allowed for the birth of civilization itself. The animals weren't just part of their story. They were the catalysts for it. So as we bring our journey to a close, let's look at Göbekli Tepe one last time. It's more than a collection of ancient stones. It's a monumental testament to a time when humans saw themselves as part of a larger, sacred whole. They were deeply intertwined with the animal kingdom, viewing it not just as a source of sustenance, but as a wellspring of power, wisdom, and profound spiritual guidance. The carvings are a silent, powerful message across millennia, reminding us of a lost worldview, a sacred landscape where every creature had its place and its purpose. They challenge us to reconsider our own relationship with the natural world and to see, as they did, the spirit that resides within it. In our journey so far, we've marveled at its incredible age, deciphered some of its intricate symbolism, and stood in awe of the people who built it. But now, we arrive at what is arguably the most baffling chapter in its story, its end. Because Göbekli Tepe wasn't simply abandoned to the sands of time. It was deliberately and meticulously buried. Imagine that for a moment. After centuries, perhaps even millennia of use, after generations poured their sweat, skill, and spirit into raising these monumental pillars, a conscious decision was made to entomb the entire site. This wasn't a simple act of walking away. This was a massive undertaking, a final, grand project. The immense circular enclosures, with their towering T-pillars and intricate carvings, were systematically backfilled with millions of cubic feet of earth, stone, and debris. This debris wasn't just random dirt. It included flint tools, animal bones, and fragments of human bone, almost like a time capsule of the very life that once thrived there. The effort required would have been colossal, rivaling the effort it took to build the structures in the first place. This raises the most profound question of all. Why? Why would a society go to such incredible lengths to bury its most sacred and significant creation? This act of burial is not just an epilogue. It's a central part of the Göbekli Tepe enigma, a final, silent message left for us to decipher. One of the leading theories revolves around a fundamental shift in the very fabric of their society and belief system. Göbekli Tepe was the product of a hunter-gatherer world. Its symbolism is steeped in wild animals, shamanic journeys, and a cosmology tied to the untamed natural world. But right around the time Göbekli Tepe was being buried, something revolutionary was happening across the Fertile Crescent, the dawn of agriculture. This wasn't just a change in diet. It was a complete reordering of human existence. Life became tied to the seasons of planting and harvesting, to domesticated animals, and to permanent settlements. Could it be that the old gods of the hunt, the wild beasts carved onto the pillars, no longer spoke to a people who were now masters of the land? Perhaps the burial was a symbolic act of closing the book on the hunter-gatherer era. It was a way of saying, this was who we were, but it is not who we are now. By interring their ancestral temples, they were paving the way for a new world, with new rituals, new deities, and a new relationship with the cosmos. The burial, in this sense, was not an act of destruction, but one of transformation, a ritual sealing of the past to sanctify the future. Another fascinating possibility is that the burial was an act of profound respect, a way to decommission the sacred space properly. In many cultures, both ancient and modern, places of immense power aren't just abandoned. They are given a proper burial or send-off. Think of it like a sacred vessel that, once it has served its purpose, cannot simply be thrown away, but must be respectfully returned to the earth. Göbekli Tepe was undoubtedly a place of immense spiritual energy. It had witnessed countless ceremonies, rituals, and cosmic observations. Perhaps, when its time was done, the only fitting end was to return it to the earth from which its stones were quarried. It was a way to neutralize its power, to put it to sleep, rather than let it fall into ruin or potential misuse by future generations, who might not understand its significance. This theory paints a picture of a people deeply connected to their traditions, who saw the burial not as an erasure, but as the ultimate act of reverence for a place that had defined their ancestors for thousands of years. It was a final, powerful ceremony in a place built for ceremony. Let's explore a more dramatic and speculative idea. What if the burial of Göbekli Tepe was a response to some kind of cataclysmic event or a perceived spiritual crisis? We know from geological and climate data that this period, around 11,600 years ago, coincides with the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis. This controversial theory suggests that a comet or asteroid fragment struck the Earth, causing widespread environmental devastation, megafauna extinction, and a sudden return to Ice Age conditions. We see a carving on Pillar 43, the Vulture Stone, which some researchers, like Martin Sweetman, have interpreted as a record of this cosmic impact. The carvings appear to show a date stamp using constellations for an event that aligns perfectly with this time frame. If this interpretation is correct, then the world of the Göbekli Tepe builders was literally torn apart. Their sky fell, their climate changed, and the animals they revered vanished. In the face of such a terrifying, world-altering event, perhaps their old beliefs and rituals seemed to have failed. Maybe they believed their temple had somehow angered the cosmos, or conversely, that it had failed to protect them. Burying the site could have been a desperate act to appease angry sky gods, to hide their sacred knowledge from a now hostile universe, or to simply put a terrifying chapter behind them. In this scenario, the burial is a scar, a monument to a trauma that reshaped their entire worldview and forced them into a new way of life. Another compelling theory suggests the burial was a deliberate act of concealment, a way to protect sacred knowledge. The builders of Göbekli Tepe were not primitive. They possessed sophisticated knowledge of engineering, astronomy, and complex symbolism. This knowledge was likely held by a priestly or shamanic elite. What if this elite, for some reason, decided this knowledge was too powerful or too dangerous for a changing world? As society shifted towards agriculture and larger, more complex settlements, perhaps the old esoteric wisdom was seen as a threat to a new social order. Or maybe they foresaw a period of conflict and decline and chose to hide their sacred legacy, preserving it beneath the earth for a future time when humanity would be ready for it again. They weren't destroying it, they were creating a vault. They were intentionally safeguarding their most profound secrets, entrusting them to the earth itself. The backfill material, filled with the detritus of their daily and ritual lives, becomes part of the protective layer, a puzzle box for future archaeologists to unlock. By burying Göbekli Tepe, they ensured its preservation in a way that simply abandoning it never could have. They effectively hit pause, creating the pristine archaeological site that we are so privileged to study today. Let's also consider a more practical social motivation. For centuries, Göbekli Tepe was a central meeting point, a pilgrimage site that brought different clans of hunter-gatherers together. It was a hub of social and ritual activity. Building and maintaining it required immense cooperative effort, which would have reinforced social bonds. But what happens when that system is no longer necessary or sustainable? As people began to settle in villages and focus on farming their own land, the need for this central pan-tribal hub may have diminished. Local loyalties might have started to outweigh the old regional identities centered on the temple. Continuing to maintain and expand Göbekli Tepe might have become a source of social tension rather than cohesion, a burden from the past. The deliberate burial could have been a collective political decision to decentralize power and ritual. It was a conscious move away from the old centralized model of society towards a new village-based existence. Each new community could now have its own smaller shrines and its own local traditions. Burying the great ancestral temple was a way of leveling the playing field, allowing a new form of society to emerge without being overshadowed by the monumental legacy of the past. It was a pragmatic choice for a society in transition. Finally, we cannot discount the possibility that we are trying to impose a single explanation on a process that may have been multifaceted and occurred over a long period. The burial of Göbekli Tepe might not have been a single event, but a gradual process. Perhaps as older, larger enclosures fell out of use, they were ritually buried, while newer, smaller enclosures were built nearby. We see this pattern at the site. The oldest, grandest circles are in one area, while smaller, more rectangular structures appear later. This could represent an evolution of ritual practice. The act of burial itself became part of the ongoing ceremony of the site. Each generation might have honored its predecessors by entombing their sacred spaces while creating their own. Over centuries, this process of building, using, and then burying would have led to the creation of the artificial hill, the Potbelly Hill, that we see today. So the end wasn't a sudden stop, but a slow, evolving transformation where death and birth, burial and construction were intertwined. The final act of covering the entire site would have been the culmination of a long-held tradition, a final, respectful closure of a cycle that had spanned thousands of years. The deliberate burial of Göbekli Tepe is its final, and perhaps greatest, statement. It is an act that speaks of immense purpose, whether that purpose was to mark the end of an era, to show ultimate reverence, to react to a catastrophe, to protect sacred knowledge, or to reshape society. What is certain is that this act of burial is what preserved it. Without this immense effort, Göbekli Tepe would have weathered away, its stones toppled and scattered, its secrets lost to the wind. Instead, the builders created a time capsule, a message in a bottle on a geological scale. They ensured that one day their world would be rediscovered. They passed the torch, not to their immediate descendants, but to a far distant future to us. And as we carefully unearth what they so carefully interred, we are not just excavating a ruin. We are participating in the final act of their ceremony, completing a circle that began 12,000 years ago. In our last episode, we stood in awe of Göbekli Tepe, a site that completely rewrote our understanding of the Stone Age. We explored its monumental T-shaped pillars, the intricate carvings of animals, and the profound questions it raises about the dawn of human civilization. If you missed that, I highly recommend you check it out. Today, we're taking a step forward in time, but we're not leaving the echoes of Göbekli Tepe behind. In fact, we're going to follow them. We're re-embarking on a journey to see how the symbolic language born at Göbekli Tepe didn't just fade away, but resonated through millennia, shaping the spiritual world of the people who came after. Our primary destination is one of the most famous Neolithic sites on Earth, Cataluyuk. But we'll also explore other locations that carry the distinct artistic and spiritual DNA of that first temple. This is a story of legacy, of how ideas and beliefs can travel through time, creating a remarkable thread of continuity that connects humanity across thousands of years. So, let us trace these ancient echoes and uncover a spiritual lineage that stretches from the hunter-gatherers of Göbekli Tepe to the first farmers of the Neolithic Revolution. Imagine the world around 9600 BCE. The hunter-gatherers who built Göbekli Tepe were masters of their environment. They understood the seasons, the migration of animals, and the spiritual forces they believed governed their world. And they carved this worldview into stone, a fearsome menagerie of boars, foxes, snakes, and most prominently, birds of prey, especially vultures. These weren't just decorations. They were powerful symbols, a complex language of myth and cosmology that we are only just beginning to decipher. Now, fast forward about 2,000 years. The world has changed. Humanity is on the cusp of a revolution. People are beginning to settle down, to domesticate plants and animals, and to build the first true towns. One of the most incredible examples of this new way of life is a sprawling settlement in modern-day Turkey called Cataluyuk. At first glance, Cataluyuk seems a world away from Göbekli Tepe. It's a dense honeycomb of mud brick houses, entered from the roof, where thousands of people lived, worked, and died. It represents the birth of settled agricultural society. But when you start to look closer, when you peel back the layers of its homes and shrines, you find something astonishing. The echoes of Göbekli Tepe are everywhere. Let's start with the most striking connection, the art. The walls of the houses at Cataluyuk are covered in incredible murals and plaster reliefs. And what do we find? A familiar cast of characters. We see massive bulls with real horns embedded in the walls, their power and virility celebrated just as it was on the pillars of Göbekli Tepe. We see leopards, often depicted in pairs, symbols of ferocity and prowess that also prowled the stone pillars of the earlier sanctuary. But the most profound link comes from the sky. Just like at Göbekli Tepe, birds of prey, and vultures in particular, play a central role in the symbolic life of Cataluyuk. We find paintings of huge vultures swooping down upon headless human bodies. This might seem gruesome, but it points to a shared and incredibly specific set of beliefs about life, death, and the journey of the soul. At Göbekli Tepe, we saw pillars with carvings that some archaeologists interpret as a vulture carrying away a human head. Now, 2 millennia later, in a bustling town, we see the same theme painted vividly on the walls of their most sacred spaces. This isn't a coincidence. This is evidence of a deeply ingrained tradition, a system of belief about the role of vultures in the cycle of death and rebirth, a practice known as excarnation, where the flesh is removed from the bones by birds before burial. This symbolic continuity suggests that Göbekli Tepe wasn't just a local phenomenon. It was a crucible, a center of innovation, not just for architecture, but for symbolic thought. It was a place where a complex religious and mythological system was forged, a system so powerful and compelling that it outlasted its creators and was carried forward by their descendants. Think of it like a cultural wellspring. The ideas that bubbled up at Göbekli Tepe flowed outwards, influencing communities across Anatolia and the Near East for thousands of years. We can see this artistic and symbolic lineage as a kind of intellectual inheritance. The first farmers of Cataluyuk didn't invent their entire belief system from scratch. They built upon the foundations laid by their hunter-gatherer ancestors. They adapted the old symbols to their new way of life. For instance, the wild bull, a symbol of untamed nature at Göbekli Tepe, might have taken on new meaning at Cataluyuk, where cattle were beginning to be domesticated. The symbol evolved, but its core power remained. This shows us that the transition from hunting and gathering to farming wasn't just an economic shift. It was a process of cultural and spiritual negotiation, blending the old with the new, and the connections don't stop at Cataluyuk. At another important Neolithic site in Turkey Nevali, Kori, which was partially contemporary with Göbekli Tepe, we find similar T-shaped pillars and sculptures, including a remarkable carving of what appears to be a human head with a snake or a bird on top, echoing the same themes of transformation and spiritual power. Later, at a site called Jerf El Amar in Syria, archaeologists discovered circular communal buildings with benches, reminiscent of the circular enclosures at Göbekli Tepe, suggesting a continuity in ritual practices and social organization. It's like following a trail of symbolic breadcrumbs scattered across the landscape of the ancient Near East. Each site adds another piece to the puzzle, showing us the vast sphere of influence that emanated from Göbekli Tepe. It was a cultural and religious capital for the Stone Age, a beacon whose light guided the spiritual development of the region for millennia. This remarkable lineage demonstrates something profound about our ancestors. They weren't just struggling for survival. They were engaged in a deep, continuous conversation about the meaning of existence, a conversation carried on through powerful shared symbols that transcended time, geography, and even massive shifts in their way of life. So what does this all mean? It means we can no longer see the Neolithic Revolution as a sudden break with the past. Instead, we see a gradual evolution, a long-term process, where ancient beliefs were reinterpreted and woven into the fabric of a new world. Göbekli Tepe provided the foundational symbolic vocabulary. The bulls, the birds, the serpents, and later communities like Cataluyuk acted as the poets and authors who used that vocabulary to write new stories, to create new meanings for their settled agricultural lives. The sacred architecture, the ritual practices, the obsession with the animal world, and the specific focus on excarnation all point to a shared cultural heritage. Göbekli Tepe may have been the source, the great temple on the hill, but its influence was carried in the minds and memories of the people who spread out across the landscape, establishing new communities and new ways of being. They carried with them a spiritual toolkit that had been honed for generations. This incredible continuity reveals a level of intellectual and spiritual sophistication that we are only just beginning to appreciate. The story of humanity's journey into civilization is far more complex and spiritually rich than we ever imagined. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey back in time. We've traced a line of thought from the world's first temple to its first towns, uncovering a legacy of belief that shaped our ancestors' world. The story isn't over, and there are still so many mysteries to unravel. We've analyzed the pillars, deciphered potential meanings of the animal carvings, and marveled at the sheer scale of it all. But now, I want us to take a step back, a big step. Let's move beyond the archaeological data, beyond the carbon dating, and the ground-penetrating radar, and try to connect with the most important element of this entire story: the people. Who were they? What did they think? What did they feel? This isn't just about stone and soil. It's about fostering a sense of empathy for these prehistoric minds. It's about trying, just for a moment, to see the world through their eyes. Let's imagine it together. Picture a world without written language, without cities, without agriculture as we know it. You are a hunter-gatherer. Your life is an intimate dance with nature. You know the migratory patterns of the gazelle, the exact moment the wild wheat is ready to be harvested. The sun and the moon aren't just celestial bodies. They are the clock and calendar that govern your existence. The stars aren't just distant lights. They are a map, a storybook, a divine canvas. Now, in this world, something incredible is happening. Your community, your clan, is coming together with others. You are undertaking a project of unimaginable scale. You are quarrying multi-ton pillars of limestone, not with metal tools, but with flint and brute force. You are shaping them, carving them with intricate, powerful symbols of the animals that dominate your world. The fox, the boar, the vulture, the serpent. What is driving you? Think about the sheer dedication. This wasn't a weekend project. This was a generational effort. It required coordination, planning, and a shared belief so powerful it could literally move mountains. Let's try to feel what they felt. Imagine standing within one of those circular enclosures for the first time. The massive T-shaped pillars tower over you, like silent stone giants. The air is thick with the smoke of animal fat torches, casting dancing shadows across the carved reliefs. The sound of chanting, of drums, of rattling instruments echoes off the stone, creating a mesmerizing, almost hypnotic atmosphere. What emotions would be swirling inside you? Awe, certainly. The feeling of being in the presence of something vast, ancient, and powerful. But also, perhaps, a touch of fear. A reverent fear. A respect for the immense forces of nature and the spirit world that these pillars were meant to represent and placate. The carvings weren't just decorations. They were alive with meaning. That vulture might represent the cycle of life and death, carrying the spirits of the deceased to the sky. The serpent could symbolize transformation, the underworld, or the life-giving power of water. This wasn't just construction. It was a profound act of creation, of communication with the cosmos. It was an attempt to understand their place in the universe, to impose order on a world that was often chaotic and unpredictable. When we look at Göbekli Tepe, we are not just looking at old stones. We are looking at the physical manifestation of their deepest questions, their spiritual beliefs, and their most powerful emotions. It is so easy to fall into the trap of viewing prehistoric people as primitive or simple. This is a profound underestimation, a disservice to their legacy. The builders of Göbekli Tepe possessed a sophisticated intelligence. The geometry of the enclosures, the complex symbolism, the logistical genius required to build it. All of this points to minds as sharp and as curious as our own. They were astronomers, engineers, artists, and theologians, all rolled into one. Their artistic skill is undeniable. These aren't crude stick figures. The carvings are dynamic, capturing the essence and power of each animal. Look at the tension in the muscles of a carved boar, the subtle curve of a snake. This is the work of masters, individuals who had spent a lifetime observing the natural world and honing their craft. They possessed an aesthetic sense, a desire to create beauty and meaning that transcends time. And what about their spiritual lives? Clearly, they were deep and complex. Göbekli Tepe has been called the world's first cathedral, and for good reason. This was a sacred place, a place where the veil between the physical and spiritual worlds was thin. It was here that they likely held rituals, celebrated cosmic events, honored their dead, and passed down their sacred stories from one generation to the next. They were grappling with the big questions. Where do we come from? What happens when we die? What is our relationship to the universe? These are the same questions we still ask ourselves today. By trying to understand their symbols, by imagining their rituals, by feeling their awe and reverence, we are doing more than just studying history. We are on a pathway to understanding their very humanity. We are connecting with our own distant ancestors on a deeply personal level. The intelligence, the creativity, the spiritual yearning that drove them to build Göbekli Tepe is the same spark that drives human innovation and art today. It's the same desire for connection and meaning that defines our own lives. Göbekli Tepe is a mirror reflecting our own shared human journey. It reminds us that for tens of thousands of years, we have looked up at the same stars and wondered. We have sought to understand our world and create places of meaning and community. These prehistoric hunter-gatherers were not some alien other. They were us. Their story is our story. Even after decades of groundbreaking research, Göbekli Tepe still guards its secrets fiercely. It's like a book written in a lost language, where we can admire the beautiful script but can only guess at the story it tells. This is where we stand now, at the edge of understanding, peering into the deep past, knowing that what we've discovered is just the tip of the iceberg. Every discovery here seems to open up a dozen new questions, creating a fascinating and sometimes frustrating puzzle for archaeologists. So, what are these great unanswered questions? The biggest one, the elephant in the room, is still, why? Why did these hunter-gatherer societies, people we once thought were simple and nomadic, suddenly decide to undertake such a monumental construction project? What was the driving force, the spark of inspiration or desperation, that compelled them to carve and raise these massive T-shaped pillars, some weighing as much as a school bus? Was it a response to a celestial event, a place to honor their dead, a neutral ground for different clans to gather, or something else entirely, something our modern minds can't even conceive of? And who were the people represented by these pillars? The prevailing theory is that these T-shaped monoliths are stylized human figures. Their arms and hands are carved along their sides, often wearing belts and loincloths. But they have no faces, no individual identities. Are they ancestors, revered elders, watching over the living? Are they supernatural beings, guardians, or even gods from a prehistoric pantheon we know nothing about? The anonymity is profound. It suggests that the collective, the community, was more important than the individual. But without any written records, this interpretation remains a highly educated guess. Then there's the rich and complex symbolism carved all over these pillars. We see a whole zoo of animals, menacing scorpions, powerful bulls, cunning foxes, graceful cranes, and slithering snakes. But what do they mean? Are these simply depictions of the local wildlife? That seems too simple. Some researchers suggest they are shamanic symbols, spirit animals, or representations of different clans or tribes. Others believe they might be part of a complex astrological system, a prehistoric zodiac mapping the stars. For instance, the famous vulture stone, with its headless man and collection of animals, has been interpreted as a record of a catastrophic comet impact around 10,950 BC. It's a compelling idea, but it's just one of many competing theories. We are essentially trying to decipher a symbolic language without a Rosetta Stone, and the construction itself is a mystery. How did these people, with only flint tools, manage to quarry, transport, and erect these multi-ton pillars with such precision? The logistics are staggering. It would have required immense social organization, a shared vision, and hundreds of people working together over many generations. Where did they learn these skills? Was Göbekli Tepe the first of its kind, or are there even older, undiscovered sites that served as a blueprint? The sheer scale of the operation challenges everything we thought we knew about the capabilities of hunter-gatherer societies. Another perplexing mystery is the deliberate burial of the site. After centuries of use, the enclosures at Göbekli Tepe were intentionally and carefully filled in with earth, stone, and animal bones. Why would anyone go to such great lengths to build this incredible place, only to bury it? It wasn't a sudden collapse or abandonment. It was a slow, methodical process. Was it a ritual burial? A way of decommissioning the site once its purpose was served? Was it to protect it from outsiders or from a perceived threat? Or perhaps the beliefs that gave rise to Göbekli Tepe changed, and the new generation decided to literally bury the past and start anew. This act of burial is almost as significant as the act of building, and it's a riddle we are far from solving. Think about what might still be hidden beneath the soil. So far, archaeologists have only excavated about 5% of the entire complex. Geophysical surveys show that at least 20 more enclosures, some even larger and older than the ones we've seen, are still waiting to be unearthed. What secrets do they hold? Will they contain different symbols, new types of pillars, or artifacts that could finally unlock the meaning of this place? Imagine future archaeologists with more advanced technology uncovering a new enclosure. They might find a pillar with a completely new set of carvings, a symbol that provides the missing link, or even organic remains that give us a clear picture of the rituals performed here. The challenges are immense. Without a written language, our interpretations are always going to be speculative. We are projecting our own understanding of religion, society, and symbolism onto a culture that was alien to us in almost every way. It's a humbling realization. The prehistoric mind, its beliefs and motivations, remains largely a mystery. We can analyze the bones and the stones, but we can't truly get inside the heads of the people who created this place. We are looking at their world through a keyhole, catching only glimpses of a much larger, more complex picture. So where does that leave us? It leaves us with a profound sense of wonder. Göbekli Tepe is more than just an archaeological site. It's a monument to the enduring human quest for meaning. It shows us that thousands of years before the pyramids, before writing, before cities, our ancestors were already grappling with the big questions of existence. They were creating complex societies, developing sophisticated belief systems, and expressing them through incredible feats of art and engineering. The story of Göbekli Tepe is far from over. It is an unfolding narrative, with each new discovery adding a new chapter. It serves as a powerful reminder that the past is not a dead, static thing. It is alive with possibilities, and it still has so many stories to tell. The unanswered questions are not a sign of failure, but a testament to the depth and complexity of human history. They are an invitation to keep digging, to keep questioning, and to keep imagining. Göbekli Tepe stands as an enduring symbol of our shared human ingenuity and our relentless search for our place in the cosmos. The greatest discovery may still be waiting, just beneath the surface. As our journey through the mysteries of Göbekli Tepe comes to a close, we stand in awe of what we've uncovered. This isn't just a collection of old stones. It's a testament to the incredible sophistication and profound spiritual life of our hunter-gatherer ancestors, who lived an astonishing 12,000 years ago. Throughout this series, Göbekli Tepe, Decoding the Animal Symbolism, we've peeled back the layers of time to reveal a lost world. We've seen that the intricate carvings adorning these massive pillars are far from simple decorations. They are a complex symbolic language, a sacred text written in stone. These images of foxes, vultures, boars, and serpents tell a story of a people deeply connected to their environment, the cosmos, and the unseen spiritual realm. Think about it for a moment. Long before the first cities were built, long before the invention of writing or even pottery, people gathered here. They quarried, transported, and erected these monumental pillars, some weighing up to 20 tons. What could possibly motivate such a colossal undertaking? It wasn't for shelter or defense. The evidence points to something far more profound, a shared belief system, a powerful spiritual hunger. Göbekli Tepe was a cathedral of the Stone Age, a place where humanity first came together on a grand scale to express its relationship with the universe. We've explored the possible meanings behind these animal symbols. Was the cunning fox a trickster figure in their mythology, or perhaps a guardian of the sacred space. The fox appears more than any other animal here, silently watching from the pillars. Its prominence suggests it held a special place in their worldview. We've debated whether these were representations of spirit animals, clan totems, or guides for shamans journeying into other worlds. Each carving is a piece of a puzzle, and while we may never have all the answers, the quest to understand is what makes this so compelling. Then there are the birds, especially the vulture. Its association with the sky and with death is a powerful theme found in many later cultures. At Göbekli Tepe, we see vultures depicted alongside headless human figures. Could this be evidence of early excarnation rituals, where the dead were left exposed for vultures to consume, releasing their spirit to the heavens? This practice, known as a sky burial, would make Göbekli Tepe not just a temple, but a vital link between the worlds of the living and the dead, a place where the cycle of life and rebirth was honored. These scenes offer a chilling but fascinating window into the prehistoric understanding of mortality and the afterlife. And let's not forget the more dangerous creatures etched into these stones. The aggressive boar, the venomous serpent, the powerful auroch. These weren't just animals they hunted. They were forces of nature, embodying raw power, danger, and perhaps even cosmic principles. Were these symbols meant to appease powerful spirits, to ward off evil, or to be harnessed in ritual for protection and strength? The placement of these figures on the pillars, often in dynamic, narrative-like scenes, suggests they were part of a grand, epic story, the foundational myths of a lost civilization. One of the most revolutionary ideas that Göbekli Tepe presents is that it flips our understanding of civilization on its head. For centuries, we believed that complex religion and monumental architecture were byproducts of agriculture. The old theory went, first, people settled down to farm, creating food surpluses, which then allowed for specialized labor and the construction of temples. But Göbekli Tepe predates widespread agriculture by millennia. This suggests that it might have been the other way around. Perhaps the need to gather for these massive, coordinated religious projects is what spurred the development of settled life and agriculture in the first place. The desire for meaning, the power of a shared faith, may have been the very engine that drove the Neolithic revolution. So as we look at the silent, enigmatic faces of Göbekli Tepe's pillars, what do we see? We see the dawn of human religion. We see the very origins of what we call civilization. These hunter-gatherers were not the simple, primitive people we once imagined. They were astronomers, engineers, artists, and theologians. They possessed a rich cosmology and a deep understanding of their world, which they expressed not in words, but in the enduring language of stone and symbol. They were asking the same big questions we still ask today. Where did we come from? What is our place in the cosmos? What happens after we die? The intentional burial of Göbekli Tepe around 8000 BC is perhaps its final mystery. Why would a culture spend centuries, even millennia, building such a magnificent complex, only to deliberately cover it with earth and walk away? Was it to protect it? Was it part of a ritual, a symbolic death of an old world as a new one began? Or did their belief system simply change? This final act preserved the site in pristine condition, a time capsule waiting for us to find. It's as if they left a message for the future, a glimpse into the very soul of our ancient ancestors. In a way, our journey has brought us full circle. We began with questions about ancient carvings and ended with profound questions about ourselves. Göbekli Tepe teaches us that the human quest for meaning is not a recent development, but is woven into the very fabric of our species. The drive to build, to create, to connect with something larger than ourselves is perhaps our most defining characteristic. These stones, buried for thousands of years, have been resurrected to tell their story, reminding us of the deep, shared heritage that connects all of humanity across the vast expanse of time. The voices of Göbekli Tepe may be silent, but their message echoes louder than ever. Thank you for joining us on this incredible expedition into the prehistoric mind, and for being a part of this exploration from the very beginning. We hope this series has sparked your curiosity and given you a new appreciation for the depth and complexity of our ancient past. If you've been captivated by the mysteries of Göbekli Tepe, please give this final video a like, and consider sharing the series with friends, family, or anyone who loves a good historical puzzle. And of course, if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on our next deep dive into the ancient world. Thanks for watching.